Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. It's Roshan Mohammed Saleh here, the editor of Five Pillars. And today I'm going to talk about Aafia Siddiqui. And the reason why I'm going to talk about Aafia Siddiqui, who has been described as possibly the most wrong Muslim woman in the whole world, is because of an unfortunate incident last weekend when Malik Faisal Akram from Birmingham took 4 people hostage in a synagogue in Texas and demanded the release of Aafia Siddiqui, who's being held in a high security prison nearby. Now, obviously, we're not condoning what Malik Faisal Akram did. In fact, Aafia Siddiqui herself issued a statement through her lawyer condemning what he did and saying, "Not in my name." However, this act has put Aafia Siddiqui back in the spotlight, and she deserves to be back in the spotlight because she is indeed, according to many, the most wronged Muslim woman in the world, a symbol of the war on terror, a victim of the George Bush years. Now, who is Aafia Siddiqui? I'm going to talk about that with a very special guest in a few moments' time. But basically, she is currently serving 86 years in a high security American prison in Texas for she's been convicted of trying to kill American soldiers. But that is not even half the story. That's like 1% of the story. Her history is absolutely fascinating. It's mysterious. And today we're going to go into it in depth with my special guest, who is the investigative journalist, Yvonne Ridley. And Yvonne is probably, perhaps, and I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying this, one of the biggest experts on Aafia Siddiqui living, because she's done a documentary into her life. She went to Afghanistan in search of Aafia Siddiqui to uncover what happened to her. She's literally stayed on this case throughout over the last 10 years. She's campaigned with Imran Khan in Pakistan on behalf of Aafia Siddiqui. So please take a listen to what Yvonne told me a little bit earlier on. So Yvonne, you're obviously quite an expert on Aafia Siddiqui. You did a documentary on her, I remember about 10 years ago or something, and you've obviously done a lot of research into her life, and you followed up this case since then. Let's take this from the beginning. Let's go kind of chronologically. So where was Aafia born? And tell me a little bit about her early life.
Yeah, she was born in Karachi, comes from a very well-heeled upscale family, part of the glitterati, I would say, in Karachi. And she, like her brother who's an architect and sister who's a doctor, she's incredibly bright and intelligent, and went to study at university in America.
So what, before you go into that,
admiration of people as esteemed as Professor Noam Chomsky, and she went to MIT. Yeah, she had a glittering career ahead of her.
So basically, she was born and brought up in Pakistan, and she went to America to study. I don't know, I guess about the age of 18 or something like that.
Yes.
And what did she study exactly?
Well, she she became a neuroscientist, and unfortunately, some journalists and some Western intelligence agencies can't differentiate between nuclear scientist and neuroscientist. Her studies were concerned with the brain, and shortly before she disappeared, she was developing a program for mentally challenged children to help them develop to read and write.
So yeah, the media often kind of portray her, when they say neuroscientist, I mean, basically no one knows what that means. And because it sounds so exotic, people associate it, all right, she's making chemicals. She knows how to make chemicals. And is that kind of, do you think that's intentional to try and, kind of muddy the waters?
Part of it was intentional, and part of it is that US intelligence is a contradiction in terms. They're as thick as mince. And when she first disappeared, the FBI held a press conference to say that She was selling conflict diamonds and had been in and out of places like Sierra Leone. And her lawyer, Elaine Whitfield Sharp, did some quick investigations and said, actually, when you say she was in Sierra Leone buying conflict diamonds for Al Qaeda, she was running a summer school for children in Boston.
Right. Okay. So I mean, all the information that's coming out about her life seems to be so contradictory, but I mean, we can establish that her studies did not equip her to make bombs for Al Qaeda or anything like that.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not
All
at
right.
all.
So in terms of her personal life, Yvonne, so did she get married in the United States? Did she have kids there, or was that in Pakistan?
She married a Pakistani man who, again, came from the same circle in Karachi. I think that his family were very wealthy in the pharmaceutical industry. Unfortunately, it wasn't a happy match. And they had quite a volatile relationship, which ended in while she was pregnant, carrying her third child.
So they have three. They had three children together, and then they got divorced or something.
Yes, they were. The divorce began during her pregnancy with the third child.
Okay, so they were living in the United States. So she probably was, by the time she kind of, became, the mystery began, she'd been living in the United States for about 10 years, something like that, or a bit more.
She'd been in and out of the United States, as had her husband, her ex-husband. He actually first came into the attention of the FBI and was soon able to shake them off and allay any suspicions they had about him. One can only guess what he said to the FBI, but as a result of that conversation, Aafia was disappeared.
Why did they attract the attention of the FBI in the first place?
Brownskins, Muslims, after the events of 9/11, you don't have to do that much. I think he had bought some night vision binoculars because he was interested in bird watching and things like that. You don't have to do much to get the attention of the authorities.
Yeah. Okay, so then the mystery really begins, and we lose track of her for about 5 years. So around what time scale is this? Is this after 9/11, or what kind of date period?
She disappeared in March 2003, and I subsequently found out she was taken in a joint ISI, Pakistan intelligence-led operation with US intelligence.
And what happened to her exactly? It was rendered to Bagram and then to Guantanamo. What happened? What do we know?
We know for a fact that she was in Bagram, and that is because I interviewed nearly half a dozen credible eyewitnesses who could identify her. One of them was Dr. Gerhard Bahir, who was in the next cell to her in Bagram. He is the son-in-law of Hekmatyar in Afghanistan, the warlord. Yeah. So, he was a very credible witness. We do know that the prisoners all went on hunger strike because they didn't want her in the prison. Some thought that she was going mad, insane, because of the conditions in which she was held. Others weren't quite sure what a woman was doing in this all-male environment, and they weren't sure if she was a spy. This is an environment where the climate is thick with paranoia and suspicion. and Binyam Mohammed, who ended up in Bagram, he positively identified her as well and went on record that she was there. The Americans completely denied having any woman in Bagram, and then I got her prison number 650 and gave it to Lord Ahmed Nazir, who made his own inquiries, and the Americans, whether they were impressed by letter-headed note paper from the House of Lords, I don't know, but they then said, yes, we did have a woman prisoner. But they then said it wasn't Aafia, but they wouldn't tell me who it was.
Okay. What happened to her kids?
We think that Suleiman was fatally injured during when she was disappeared, and I've heard various accounts, and it looks as though Suleiman is dead.
He's the eldest, is he? Was he the eldest?
He was the baby.
Oh, he was the baby. Okay.
Yes. Mariam and Mohammed subsequently were returned to the home in Karachi, both with American accents, spoke very little Urdu, but they did speak good English with American accents. Of course, these two children were both born in America and are US citizens, so they have quite an unusual status.
Aafia is a US citizen as well, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, this is one of the things that people like to muddy the waters. She is a Pakistani citizen, and the worst thing that she could have is a Pakistan passport, because her country, not the people, but the authorities have done absolutely nothing to get her repatriated, to get her released, to try and get her justice. It's been quite despicable how wheels within wheels have worked against her and turned her into the most wronged woman in the planet.
So you think that for all those 5 years when she was missing, 2003 to 2008, you think she was being held in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Just Afghanistan, not Guantanamo Bay, because I've heard reports that she was rendered to Guantanamo as well.
Well, I think that she was put in various sites, and I really don't know, but I do know that there was a merry-go-round of ghost prison sites for detainees that the Americans were at a loss with what to do. But she was definitely in Bagram.
Okay. All right. So then she suddenly reappears in 2008. Can you pick up the story from there?
Well, as soon as I found out her prison number and we got confirmation that there was or had been a woman in Bagram, I then went to Imran Khan, who was leader of his political party, for help. And he was brilliant. We organized a press conference and we traveled the length and breadth of Pakistan. Secrets cannot be kept in Pakistan. And I thought, I must find out who this woman is. And somebody in Pakistan will not be able to contain themselves and they'll tell me. And so we traveled up and down the country. As I say, hundreds of media followed and really pumped up the volume to find out where Aafia Siddiqui was. Her family were on the point of having her declared dead, which was a legal device, I think, that they were pursuing. And suddenly she appeared. She appeared in Afghanistan, and there'd been a shooting incident, and it was all very, very hazy. So I went into Afghanistan to Ghazni, to the police station where she'd been held, and spoke to eyewitnesses there.
Okay, and what happened then?
Well, I discovered that Aafia had wandered into a mosque in Ghazni, and of course, women do not walk around on their own in a war zone,
Mm.
nor do they walk around on their own in Afghanistan. And so, because she looked disheveled and disorientated, she attracted a bit of attention, and the local police were called. And the local police chief, a fine, upstanding man called Abdul Qadir, took her into custody, and he began to question her. And he said that all she was concerned about at that time was that she would not be returned to the hands of the Americans. And he said that he was the police chief, it was his investigation, and his eyes welled up in tears when he said, I promised her I would not hand her over to the Americans, but I wanted to get to the bottom of her situation. And he said, in all his years as a police chief, he could tell by the pallor of her skin and her demeanor that she had been incarcerated somewhere for quite a considerable amount of time.
What, she'd escaped or something? Or she was let go?
No, what I discovered later was that because I had made this big noise and fuss in Pakistan, her captors in Afghanistan said that they were going to release her, but they wanted her to do something first, and they asked her to write down chemical formulas.
All right.
And she wrote on these papers. Of course, it wasn't her speciality, and she made a few mistakes, and she had to start at the beginning until they were absolutely word perfect. Well, her family said as a student, whenever she made mistakes, she would scratch it out and put something in the margin to indicate this correction. But all these papers were perfectly handwritten.
Mm.
She was then driven down to Ghazni and put outside the governor's home. And she was with a young man who turned out to be her son, and they didn't even recognize each other. It was, she was so ill, and they'd been kept apart for so many years, they barely could
Yeah.
recognize each other.
So,
And so
yeah, go on. Sorry, Yvonne.
they stood outside the governor's home, and she was told, all you have to do is stand there, do not move, do not leave this spot, and you will be released as long as you follow orders. So she was standing there, and then she heard the azan, the call to prayer, and she gravitated towards the mosque. In the meantime, the governor of Ghazni had been told that a woman from Al Qaeda was walking around saying she was going to kill him. So he had put the police on alert to look out for anyone who was acting in a suspicious way outside his home.
So
Anyway, she didn't follow orders, and she followed the azan instead,
yeah.
and found herself in the mosque. When Abdul Qadir opened her bag, apparently it contained the formulas and various bottles of chemicals and a picture of the New York skyline, including the Statue of Liberty.
So you think she was framed, basically?
Well, of course she was framed. The Americans, as I say, they're as thick as mince. If they had just flown her over and let her loose in Central Park, New York, with a handbag containing these details, it would have fitted. But what on earth is a lone woman doing, wandering around Afghanistan, half drugged, with pictures of the New York skyline in her handbag. It's a
Because I know that came out in the trial, didn't it? That or I mean, she wasn't convicted of this, but she was kind of accused of trying to kill the governor of Ghazni. But you just kind of explained that incident. So let's move the story on, Yvonne. So basically,
by the way, was sacked later because he was a fraud and had convictions. So he wasn't a man who could be trusted. He was an American stooge, actually.
So eventually she was rearrested and then flown to America and she faced trial. Tell me about that.
Well, before then, she was shot. She was shot inside the prison. Abdul Qadir was gently questioning her, and he got a phone call from the FBI saying, "We're coming down to get this Al-Qaeda woman." And he said, "I'm not finished with her yet. And when I have finished my inquiry, if I deem it right, I'll hand her over." And the next day, FBI officers rocked up with about 8 to 10 American soldiers who were all pumped up and hyped up and told, "We're going to arrest Lady Al-Qaeda. She's the most dangerous woman in the world." And so they were all hyped up, pumped up, and they went into the prison cell, which was an oblong room with a yellow curtain that was divided. Abdul Qadir told me that while he was arguing with the FBI, saying that they weren't going to take her, Aafia heard American voices and got up off her bed and went and opened the curtains. Now, bearing in mind, anyone who is a terrorist suspect of the Americans is hooded, shackled by their feet and their arms. These soldiers were sitting there and she opened the curtains and they looked. And of course, they were pumped up, trigger happy, and they fired. Well, when one fired, all of them fired. Because when I got to the police cell, the gun spray was right up the walls, right up the ceilings and back as they had retreated back. During all of this shooting, the FBI had ran out of the room. Abdul Qadir is a man in a wheelchair. He was injured from a previous war and he was stuck in the room, so he saw everything. And the American soldiers had shot Aafia at close range 3 times in the gut. It's a miracle she's still alive.
Yet she was subsequently convicted of trying to kill American soldiers.
Yes, the American soldiers, at least 2 of them, said that this Al-Qaeda woman pounced out from behind the curtains, seized a gun from one of the soldiers and fired at them. So they fired back. Now, I have spoken to veteran US soldiers and they are incandescent with rage over this because they say a US soldier would never, ever, ever put down his gun other than to clean it. And if he was on operational duty and hyped up and pumped up and told, you know, this is an Al-Qaeda mission, he would have been glued to his gun. So
implausible story.
Not a single US soldier will believe this story, as much as they might even hate Muslims and might want to see Aafia in an electric chair. They are adamant, and I have yet to meet a US soldier who says, yeah, it's feasible. It's just not feasible.
What about her trial? Did she get a fair trial?
No, she didn't. Initially, the Pakistan government paid $2 million legal fees, $2 million, and I thought this is a generous gesture. This is wonderful news. But of course, because they were paying the money, they became the client. And all the footage that was shot in Ghazni, all the interviews that I did with independent witnesses, never saw the light of day in the court. The one thing that it did do is it changed the prosecution narrative, because they knew that they couldn't really sustain their argument by holding up bullets and holding up a gun. The gun that she was supposed to have taken went missing. There was no fingerprints of hers found on the gun at the time. The bullets that she was supposed to have discharged went missing. None of the science backed up the story of the prosecution. Anyone who fires a gun gets gunshot residue on their hands and their clothes. There was no gunshot residue on Aafia at all. It just simply didn't happen. Unfortunately, I would say that the defense was lackluster. Abdul Qadir, the police chief, a man with over 20 years experience of policing, was not called. And yet he was the one who arrested Aafia, who saw what Aafia was like, and had actually interviewed Aafia about the contents of the handbag that was referred to. You're quite right. It was the Western media were briefed about this Al-Qaeda woman wandering around with this handbag with chemicals and chemical formulas and the New York skyline. Why didn't they charge her? Yeah. That's fairly incriminating, but the charges were very, very narrow. It was on the shooting that they said she took the gun and shot at American soldiers.
But she was not convicted. We'll put this to bed now. She was never convicted of terrorism, of belonging to Al-Qaeda or any of that. She was convicted of trying to kill an American soldier. So we can't say an Al-Qaeda terrorist.
The opening lines of the prosecution was, this woman is not Al-Qaeda. This woman is not Taliban. She's not a supporter. She's not a terrorist. So that was all laid to bed right at the opening. The trial just focused on this narrow incident, which lasted about 5 minutes. And any attempts that Aafia made to talk about Bagram were shut down immediately.
So I read somewhere that she was related to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11. Is that true?
Who knows what he said when he was waterboarded 173 times. But a narrative came out that she was married to his nephew. And the thing is, in December of 2002, Aafia was still going through a divorce, and she had her child. And then, there's this 3-month period after the birth and after the divorce. And by the time she would have been free to marry, they'd already got Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's nephew in custody.
Right. So the timeline doesn't make sense.
Unless the CIA organized the nikah, it didn't happen.
Or invented it. So what is Aafia's situation now? So she's been in jail for about 10 years. Any word about how she is? How the last 10 years have gone?
Well, she's been attacked by other prisoners. She had hot coffee thrown over her, which almost blinded her, but she's making a recovery. She's on an 86-year sentence. And as I say, she's the most wronged woman in the planet. It's unbelievable. I have campaigned long and hard to get her out of prison. And I was in the process of getting her swapped for the American soldier that was held by the Taliban in 2014, that was Bo Bergdahl. And the Taliban, we sat and negotiated in secret. I didn't even tell the family. I didn't tell any of the politicians. I didn't tell anyone in Pakistan. Only my husband knew where I was going. And we were days away from getting Aafia released. And then in my final meeting, I was told that Aafia had been taken off the table. And I said, why? And they wouldn't tell me at first. And then in the end, they said that the ISI had said that she was not to be released. And if she returned to Pakistan, she would be dead within 48 hours. And
do you think she just has a bit too much? She knows a little bit too much?
Well, I've racked my brains over this. We know through General Pervez Musharraf's book, In the Line of Fire, that the Pakistan authorities sold Arabs and other people in the war on terror, they sold them to the Americans and made millions out of it. We know that. He wrote about it. So I was thinking maybe it's that. But then, you know, because we already know, and it's in the public arena, that they sold, you know, they would have sold their mothers to the Americans for the money that was being thrown around.
I mean, Yvonne, you've looked into this case, you know, in great depth over the years. Are you 100% totally convinced that there's literally no smoke without fire, that literally she is completely and utterly innocent? What's your hunch about what has really happened here in this case?
She went through a bitter divorce. Read into that what you want. She has also become a very convenient figure, rallying figure, so that whenever the Pakistan authorities want to whip up a crowd, they invoke her name, and tens of thousands of people will pour onto the streets and burn an American flag. And it duly gets reported and sent back to Washington. So she's a great rallying cause, and I actually think that is why she remains in America, because she's more used to the ISI and their dirty tricks in Roswell prison in Texas than she is as a free person.
So sorry, go on, Yvonne.
Who else can get thousands of people out on the streets in Pakistan? You know, she is rightly called the daughter of the nation. The irony is, while the people love her, while the people will turn out for her, the authorities do not want her back. Now, we've had various prime ministers who've said before and during and after being elected, we will return the daughter of the nation. We had Nawaz Sharif taking his entire cabinet to Aafia's family home in Karachi, laying his hand on Aafia's mother's head, and he said, I will bring the daughter of the nation back home to you within 6 weeks of being elected. Now, what I do know is not one official application has been made to the US authorities to have Aafia repatriated.
What about Imran Khan? Because you said he did a massive tour with him. Obviously, he sympathizes with Aafia Siddiqui. Do you think he has any, I mean, has he done anything for Aafia? Does he have any power to do anything? Or is this file being controlled by the ISI?
I don't think he has any power to do anything about it at the moment. I also think that he has a lot on his plate trying to turn around Pakistan, and you know, maybe she's not a priority. I know that her plight is being used as a political weapon to jab him every now and again. As I say, Aafia, is still to this day used and abused by people in power.
So paraphrasing what you said, and I hope I'm not kind of misrepresenting your position, but basically your hunch is that she was basically sold to the Americans by the ISI, and they basically gave the Americans duff information like they have with so many other people who ended up in Guantanamo and Bagram and elsewhere. And things kind of spiraled out of control so much that the Americans couldn't really admit that they got the wrong person here. So they concocted some kind of, they framed her basically and concocted some kind of incident whereby they could put her away for a long time. And now, even though she's not been convicted of terrorism, the media keep on calling her Lady Al-Qaeda. And the more they repeat that lie, the more it becomes embedded in people's minds.
Yes, that's basically it in a nutshell. And what I would also say is that Aafia, at the time of her arrest in Ghazni, was denied consular access, which must fall in line with the Geneva Conventions and the Vienna Conventions. And the Americans trashed that until she was taken to New York and she got to see, she got consular access then, but by then it was too late. Furthermore, that trial should have been held in Afghanistan. That is where the crime or alleged crime was committed. Hamid Karzai was running the country, and it was an independent country. The trial should have been held there. Can you imagine if a crime was committed in London and the perpetrator was whisked away and tried thousands of miles away?
Yeah.
It just.
So, Yvonne, just concluding now, what advice would you give? I mean, is Aafia gonna just rot in jail till her dying day, and there's nothing we can do about it? What advice you've called her the most kind of wronged woman in the world? What can people do to kind of get her out?
Put the pressure back where it should go, and that is with Pakistan and with the powers that be. What I did learn during the negotiations with the Americans is that Aafia is not worth anything to the Americans. They'd be quite happy to let her go. She was even going to get a presidential pardon from Barack Obama, and which is not what I asked for. I just asked for her to be repatriated. And they said no. We'll get a presidential pardon. And
the reason why we're talking about this now, of course, is because Malik Faisal Akram took a few people hostage and demanded her release just about a week ago. And this isn't the first time that certain groups have taken hostages and called for her release. Do you think these people are helping her in any way?
No, they're not helping her at all. I got a phone call within an hour of the hostage taking, and I was told her brother has taken this congregation in a synagogue hostage. And I said, without reading the news or reading up on it, I said, I can tell you emphatically, it will not be her blood brother. And, I know the family, and the family would never allow anyone to promote Aafia's case to justify an act of violence. And in fact, Aafia did release a statement through her lawyer that this was not in her name. Unfortunately, because she has come to represent all that is wrong with the war on terror, she's become a sort of poster girl for every jihadi group and rebel group and random one-off person who, you know, invokes her name. And it's, if I were the Americans, I would say we're repatriating her. Why should we pay for her prison food and pay for her security? And you know, she's a constant, as long as she's on American soil, she's a constant threat to our security. Send her back to Pakistan.
Okay, Yvonne, I was only intending to talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes, but it turned into well over half an hour.
It's an intriguing case.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Finally, the Americans would swap her tomorrow for Dr. Afridi.
The guy who fitted up Osama bin Laden.
And I have spoken to various Pakistani diplomats ever since he was picked up and said, you'll get her back straight away. They want him. They don't want her. They're not interested in holding on to her. It would be a swap. And the Pakistan authorities will not entertain it because he too is a bargaining chip for the ISI's dirty tricks campaigns.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne, and for spending the time, you know, telling us, giving so much information that I learned in the last half an hour as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that was Yvonne Ridley in a really, I thought, fascinating interview. There's not really a lot out there on the internet in depth in the English language about who Aafia Siddiqui is. So I'm really grateful to Yvonne for giving me that interview. And please do check out her documentary, which was, surprise, surprise, taken down from YouTube. But I think it's been re-uploaded by others. So you can find it there. It's called In Search of Prisoner 650. So just Google it and you'll find it somewhere on YouTube. It really is worth looking. As I say, Yvonne is like one of the few people that's bothered to go to Afghanistan and investigate the case of Aafia Siddiqui. Okay, so all that's left for me to do is to urge you, brothers and sisters, if you like 5 Pillars content, if you value 5 Pillars content, please do support us in any way that you possibly can. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We need to get more subscribers. Please spread the word about us. Please follow us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. Please subscribe to our newsletter. Just support 5 Pillars and spread the word as much as you can. Bi-idhnillah. And with that, I'm going to sign off. And until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.